me to share. It's a excuse for me to share simply a few of my experiences. Every door has its own nisyonos. Every door has its own specific tests. In ancient times, it was the Yetzer Hara for Avodah Zarah. More recently, it was the various isms, communism, Marxism, that took the world by storm and made promises that never came true and brought a churban to the world. And everybody knows the famous Chazal in the end of Masechet Makos that started with the 13 mitzvahs. Each one could be a gateway to Kol HaTorah Kula, and then Dovid came along and made 11. Yeshaya based it on 6, Micha on 3, and Bo Chavakuk Behamidon al Achas. The Navi Chavakuk came along and established Kol HaTorah Kula on one principle: V'tzadik be'emunah yichyah. And it seems very clear that the nisayon of our dor consists of two things which are really one. And that is kfira, heresy, lack of emunah, and taiva, and lust. And we'll soon see that these two go hand in hand. Let me share with you what I think is b'shem the Baal Shem Tov and mipi hashmua from Rabbi Chana. Everybody knows the story in Tanakh that when the 10 tribes were worshiping the Baal under the leadership of Achav Melech Yisrael, so there was a 2.5-year drought, and Eliyahu appears, and he says, if you want rain, you got to make a test. We're going to go to Har HaKarmel, and the Nevi'ei HaBaal build their altar, and Eliyahu builds his Mizbeach. He builds his Mizbeach, and whichever God will answer in fire, if the Baal is God, go after him. If Hashem, go after him. Whichever, Elokim Asher Yana Bo'esh Hu Elokim, and the fire, the Nevi'ei Baal can't produce anything, and Eliyahu Novi davens, and the fire comes down and consumes his carbon, and everybody bows down and says, Hashem Hu Elokim, Hashem Hu Elokim. So these Gedolim said as follows: in the time just prior to the coming of Mashiach, the test of Emunah is going to be so strong as if the fire, something went wrong, and instead of the fire coming down on the Mizbeach of Eliyahu Hanavi, it came down on the Mizbach HaBaal. Then it wouldn't have been so easy to say Hashem Hu Elokim, Hashem Hu Elokim. That's going to be the nisayon in the days prior to the coming of Mashiach. I think in the Shem of the Rishonah it says, I'm not sure, that before Mashiach comes, it's going to be as if the globe had a rope tied around it tight, and all humanity will have to hold on to this rope, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to shake it vigorously, and that is the rope of Emunah. That is the rope of Emunah. Now this nisayon separates into two directions. So we have, unfortunately, the vast majority of Israel that is already assimilated or intermarried, that have already absorbed all the propaganda of the media, the evolution, the feminism, the woke, the anti-religion, anti-Judaism, and they believe that the purpose of existence is to fulfill all your nothing of Hashem and His Torah. They know nothing of our history. They don't know what it means to be a Jew. They failed the test some generations ago, the test of Emunah. The Satmar Rebbe, Rabbi Yoelish Zeichat Tzadik Livracha, used to say, it was never easier to be a Jew than in America. We have much more freedom here than we had under the Tsars and previously. But it was never harder to want to be a Jew than in America, because the distractions and the temptations are so enormous that they just pull us like with a magnetic force. It is well known that Reb Chaim of Volozhin, on the day that they laid the cornerstone for the Volozhin yeshiva, was crying. And they asked him, "Avos veintir, Rebbe, avos veintir, what are you crying?" He said, "I see two things. I see that some Talmidim will come forth from Volozhin who will go off the derech, and I also see that the last stop on the train of Golus will be in America, and it will be a very, very bitter Golus." And he didn't mean it'll be a bitter Golus in the Gashmi sense. No, we're doing better Gashmi-wise than we did in most of the places where we live. But in Ruchnius, it's going to be a very bitter Golus. That is where the majority of Klal Yisrael stands, those that have already strayed from the path and given up on their 3,000-year heritage. But the Olam of Bnei Torah are Maaminim Bnei Maaminim. We have an army. In the last decades, we've produced an army of Bnei Torah, Loimdei Torah, Koilim, Rabbonim, Choshev Balabatim, Noshim Tzidkoniyos, Balei Chesed. It's Moiridik. And Memela, we are able to think that maybe we've passed the test. We've already passed this test. That was for them, but not for us. It doesn't have, this has nothing to do with us. We're Maaminim B'nai Maaminim. When the Torah speaks about Emunah, we say it every day in Oleinu, and there are numerous psukim like this. V'yodata hayoim v'hashivoisa el levavecha. You should know today, and you should turn it over to your heart. Ki Hashem hu elikim v'shamayim imal v'alahoras mitochas. That doesn't mean you should accept it. It doesn't mean you should agree to it. You should sign on the dotted line that because I am frum and I was brought up frum, therefore I automatically accept what the Klal Yisrael is expected to believe. You have to know with every fiber of your being that it's the absolute truth. Only then can you fulfill v'hashivoisa el levavecha, to absorb all of this in all of our senses and bring it into our emotions. Rav Shach Zecher Tzadik Livrocha in his Sefer Avi Ezri says that he asked the Brisker Rav, why do we need a mitzvah of Emunah when there's a mitzvah, when it's Yediyah? It's all obvious. For those people who are willing to open their eyes and think objectively, there can't be any doubt about the truth of the Emunah. From the Niflois HaBerei, from the Messiah of Maamin HaChsina, it's impossible. So the Brisker Rav told him that he asked Reb Chaim, his father, the kasha, and Reb Chaim said, you're correct, but there are certain things we cannot understand with our own seichel. That's where the mitzvah of Emunah starts. But the basics are all v'yodata. So this absolute confidence that, number one, that all that we believe in is the absolute truth, behechlet gomur, can always use improvement. Involvement in Gashmius, which I dare say all of us are influenced by the ribui of Gashmius that we see all around us. Blinds is ma'averene chachamim. It blinds us. Doesn't mean we're not maminim, but the clarity and the tifus, the absolute conviction, the strength of conviction that we ought to have is not necessary. Rabbi Yosef Lei Bloch, the Telzer Rosh Yeshiva in Lithuania, Zatzal, gave a mashal. He said There once was a person who decided to leave Europe and emigrate to America. In those days, one did so by boat. And he was told that the boat is going to make 4 stops before crossing the Atlantic. It will stop in Italy and in France, in Spain, and in Portugal, and then go across the Atlantic to America. So he said, when the boat stops, we have a little break, and people go out, I'm not going to be able to do a thing. I don't speak Italian, French, Spanish, or Portuguese. What am I going to do? I want to be able to read the street signs. So he was an industrious fellow, and he got himself a tutor in all 4 languages, and he learned enough to enjoy the recess from the boat trip in the 4 countries. So Rabbi Yosef Leib said, but the only thing he forgot was to learn English, which was the language of his permanent destination. And so we are Maaminim b'nei Maaminim, that we are here in a corridor that takes us to Olam Haba. We believe that fervently. But sometimes we get so busy with the temporary stuff. Simply walking through the recognition of schar ve'oinish, to realize that ayin roya ve'oizen shamas, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is listening. He sees everything. Everything is recorded. Noita shemayim kayaviyah. The heavens are like a curtain. When we look up at the heavens, we're supposed to say there's a curtain. Spoke to us upon him on Har Sinai. Said as follows. He saw that a Gadol wrote, why is it that people don't appreciate tefillah enough? Why is it that we don't see that his lavos and tefillah, that fire, that passion? He said, a Gadol wrote, because we don't appreciate what the tefillah can do for us. He said, no, we don't need that. If we would have the full Emunah that we stand before Hashem, like Rabbi Lezer said to his Talmidim, tefillah would be the most inspiring experience imaginable. And for this type of hakara, we need to work. B'chastei Hashem Yisborach, I've been involved in chinuch well over a yovel of years. And in the early years, I must say that we did not hear very often, if at all, questions or doubts in Emunah. 14 years ago, we founded the Maamin Foundation. Which we can see through the Niflois HaBoirei. The many Sforim have been written. Rabbi Victor Miller wrote about it and spoke about it. Mamash be'oifen niflo ma'oid from the Shara B'china and the Chovos HaLevavos. And other Sforim have been written based on his works or other works. And it's anyone with a little bit of seichel sees that this world has a creator. To trace the Messiah, to show that the Messiah is true, that the Torah Shebiksav is Min HaShemayim. There's so many things there that could not possibly have been written by anyone else. This is it. And the Amitus of Torah Shebal Peh, that the Torah Shebal Peh was given Sinai, and it too is the Dvar Hashem. I want to read you a couple of lines. 14 years ago, Torah Messiah asked me to write this booklet. After I gave a workshop there, they asked me to write this booklet. You all know Rabbi Shmuel Klein. He was in charge of the publications. He asked me to write this booklet. And Rab Shlomo gave a haskama, and this is what he said. According to the Ruach of Kfira, of a heresy, which is found in our times, there are Talmidim and Talmidos, even though they have been mischanech, trained in the yeshivas and the Beis Yaakovs, nevertheless, they are doubting the truth of our Emunah, and they do not know the simplest things, what they are based on. That's what he said. Rosh Yeshiva Reb Shmuel, where I had this course, Reb Shmuel Kamenetsky, where I had this course to learn by him a little while ago. After the first drasha that we gave as the Maamin, he left me a phone message. He said, Reb Dovid, I heard it was Givaldik, you have to go and speak everywhere. So I called him up and I said to him, Rosh Yeshiva, I appreciate that so much. And he gave me haskamas, but I said to him, I want the Rosh Yeshiva to know what I plan to do. I plan to give the youth a forum to ask all their questions and to get solid answers. Is that correct? He said, absolutely. Now, why is it that we need to do this today and we didn't need to do it 40 or 50 years ago? I'm going to give you 4 reasons that I can think of. Once upon a time, a tate was a tate and a rebbe was a rebbe. And if my father told me that there was a Maamin Har Sinai, I didn't need more than that. My rebbe said, this is our Emunah. We didn't think of questioning it once upon a time. And things are different today. A youngster can say, my father can make a mistake. He doesn't know everything. How does he know for sure? My rebbe also doesn't know everything. Let me share a story of my mother last show. This story goes back to probably the early 40s. My mother, when she was just before she got married, she was had a very chashuv with that job, and she was supporting her mother. She was supporting her mother, who was an almana, the Baba Rania. And so she told her mother, my friends are going to Canada for vacation, and I'd like to go with them. So the Baba, in her infinite wisdom, said, Nein Yachchala, that was her nickname. Nein Yachchala. Canada's so wide. Canada is so far away. I don't want you to go to Canada. My mother said, that was the end of the discussion. My mother said no. 21 years old, supporting her mother, kosher the job. My mother said no. So at a Torah Maseret convention, when I spoke for 120 people in a workshop, I said to them, as all of our children would also, in those circumstances, say the same. And every one of them shook their heads no. Every one. The Gemara in Masechta Chagiga tells us an amazing thing, except for those youngsters who are here now. So the Gemara Chagiga tells us an amazing thing. In Perek Beis in Yeshaya, there are curses that Hashem cursed the Jewish people for their sins. He's going to take away Malchus and Kahuna and the Talmidei Chachamim, terrible things. And the last curse, so the Gemara says like this: Yud Ches Klolos Kilol Yeshaya Hanavi Es Yisroel. Yeshaya cursed the Jewish people with 18 curses. Now these are not his curses; these are B'Nevuah from Hashem. And he wasn't appeased. He wasn't satisfied until he said the last curse. The last curse is Yirhavu Hanar Ba'Zoken V'Anikla Ba'Nichbor. The day will come when the Na'am, which the Gemara says means those who are empty of all Torah and mitzvahs, will be arrogant over the Nichbor, over the one who is full of Torah. That's when he was satisfied. So the Kasha is satisfied. These were not his curses. The Nevi'im loved the Klal Yisrael. They didn't want to curse them. Hashem gave him the curses. So the Mashur says this can be understood based on the Gemara in Perek Chelik, that when Mashiach comes in the era of Ikbus and Mashiach, the period before Mashiach, that there's going to be a breakdown of authority. The elders will stand up for the youth. People will raise up against the parents. A ben will shame his father. A daughter will rise up against her mother. Chachmas chachamim tischach. They'll look down on the chachamim. They'll look down on the tzaddikim. So he saw that. He saw that would be the end. That would be the last curse. That would come to Geula. So he was satisfied. So he's talking about our generation. This is us. So is it any wonder that when a father dictates to a child, this is what we do, and that in this generation, when we don't have that respect, nobody has respect for any authority. A president is not a president, a king is not a king. Nobody, everything, nothing is sacrosanct anymore. Nothing. In my days, we pledged allegiance to the flag with kavana when I went to public school before 9th grade. But they don't do that anymore. If they do it without kavana. Nothing is sacrosanct. And certainly, so we tell a bacher, you're going to sit and learn all your life. You tell a girl you're going to support a husband. And if they say, why should I do that? So this is one reason why we hear questions, and those people who are in the trenches, those people like my humble self, who deal with this all the time, we know that they have questions. Because when you take them aside and they're not intimidated, either they have questions or they've never thought about it and they have no clarity either. Just because you have no questions doesn't mean that your Emunah is strong. So this is our generation. The second reason that there are more questions today than ever before is because what's out in the street weakens Emunah terribly. The kfira, the tumah, the kfira out there. And it doesn't make doubts, but it certainly weakens, like you have orange juice and you put water in it, it gets diluted. The Emunah becomes diluted from the tumah of the street. And the third reason is even a step further on that. The Beis Halevi says in Parshas Noach, a famous Beis Halevi, I'm sure everyone knows it. It says, Rashi brings it in Chumash, but Chazal say that the animals were destroyed in the Mabul because they were crossbreeding. How do animals come to crossbreed? They have instinct. So the Beis Halevi has a very long shiur that when the people are metame the atmosphere, that it spills over into the entire bria, and even the animals become tameh and do things that are tameh. Rabbi Yalabtian says the same concept. And he doesn't bring the Beis Halevi, but he says the same concept. And he says that when he was a youngster in Lomzha, there was a hospital which it was discovered, it was an ancient hospital. This Canaan in his time did not remember when it had been built. Didn't have a cornerstone. So it was a wooden hospital. And it was discovered that the chaylim who left the hospital left with diseases they didn't come in with. So they brought professoren from Varsha, specialists, who said that the germs are so saturated in the walls of the hospital that it's not possible to sanitize it, and it must be torn down. So they tore it down, they carried the wood out of the city, and they burnt it. That was the Der HaMabul. And that is exactly what we have today. Without going into details, but there's nothing that's described about the Der HaMabul that we do not have an abundance of today. Nothing. We are living in a Der HaMabul. Literally a Der HaMabul. And so therefore, if you were to move to a desert island, but to get away from the influences, yes, you wouldn't have the direct influences, but it can come in on the airwaves because the atmosphere has already been polluted. And the fourth reason is because the Emunah Pshuta of the Bubbas we don't see. I had an aunt that was nifta recently, Isha Tzedekes Ad Moed. She said her grandmother was her mentor. And in probably the early part of the 20th century, she was a Zkena, and so her grandmother and grandfather lived probably on the Lower East Side. They paid $2 a month rent. And they didn't always have the $2 either. And in those days, if you didn't pay your rent for 2 months, the landlord had a legal right, to take your property and throw it out on the street. My wife's aunt's mother, came home as a teenager, and she sees that all the property is sitting on the street. She sits down on the curb and she starts to cry. She hasn't got a roof over her head. Her mother comes by. She says, I don't know what her name was. Kanala, what are you crying for? She says, Mama, don't you see we don't have a roof over our head? She said, not a shemedel, you foolish girl. For this you cry. She lifts up her hands to heaven and she says, Ribboni Shalom, I love you, mitadach hibrin cup, but anadach hibrin cup, with a roof over my head or without. Okay, the end of the story. Just at that moment, the neighbor across the street said, Sarah, I see you're having a problem. We just had a tenant move out of our apartment. Maybe you want to take it. 2 hours later, they had a better apartment. But the punchline of the story is the Emunah Pshuta. I remember a balabos who used to daven here, a Lepchanish, no names. And he told me, when I went to visit him when he was not well, I went to visit him and he told me that his father had a hard life. He wasn't so acting in mitzvahs anymore. But when his father would put his hand on the mezuzah to go to Kol Nidre, he would pour forth a river of tears. When's the last time you saw somebody put his hand on the mezuzah before Kol Nidre and pour forth a river of tears? So that Emunah Pshuta we don't see so often. Rabbi Avram Chaim Levine spoke at the Torah Maseret Convention. I was there. And he said as follows. The yeshivas are offered all kinds of curriculums, and every one of them is precious, but they have no time. But there's one curriculum that they dare not skip. That is the curriculum to teach Emunah. He said there should be courses in the yeshiva. That's what I wrote in this pamphlet. Not everybody took my advice. There should be courses in the yeshiva to teach about Emunah. He said, my father was a Talmud of the Chofetz Chaim. I was a Talmud of Rabbi Yemeya and Rabbi Motel Katz and Tells. I never had any doubts, but when Rabbi Victor Miller's first book came out, I had tremendous chizuk from it. It should be required reading for every yeshiva bacher, And he said, and he highly recommended the written and oral works of the Animad. So, we'll soon speak a little bit about this book that I had the schus to write. I wrote, Baruch Hashem, in the last 8 years, 3 books about Emunah and Yonim. So, Rabbi Aaron Feldman, in his haskama on this book, wrote as follows. Faced with virtually an entire Western world, which does not subscribe to the beliefs of Jews regarding creation and Matan Torah, many of our youth need to be shown why they should accept these beliefs. Although the infinite wisdom of the world and of the Torah are in themselves the greatest evidence of their infinite author, young people often need organized proofs to demonstrate the truth. Reb Reuven Feinstein, Shlita, gave me a haskama on my most recent book. And I quote from you. And he speaks there about the content of the book, but he speaks in the first paragraph about the need to do this. He says, L'davoinenu, to our great dismay, Bizmanenu ra'inu yerida nifla'a b'inyonei Emunah. We've seen a tremendous, an unbelievable decline in matters of Emunah, especially amongst our youth who learn in the yeshivas and Botei Sefer. So after that, Baruch Hashem, we have video endorsements from Rabbi Yabrudny and from Rabbi Zev Leff, numerous haskamas from Rabbi Zev Leff, and others, Rab Shleima and Rav Hirschman and the Morada Asba, Rabbi Lowy, who's been so supportive and encouraging all these years. I want to share with you these two nisyonos, Emunah and Taiva, go hand in hand. They're really one. Because the Gemara says as follows: the original Avodah Zarah by the Jewish people was not because they were interested in the Avodah Zarah. Lo avdu Yisrael Avodah Zarah el lahat lehem arayis b'faresi. If a man was doing arayis, he didn't want to hide it. He wanted to do it openly. What, I have to hide it? He didn't have a conscience. He wants to do arayis. So what does he do? Hashem doesn't let. So he takes another God who doesn't mind. He takes the Avodah Zarah. The Avodah Zarah is not mine. So the tumah of the street is a great cause for a youngster whose Emunah is not clear to begin with to say, well, I don't believe in it anyway. I'm not afraid. And someone who's already nimshach to the, someone who his Emunah is weak, why shouldn't he do the tithus? What could be better if he doesn't have to clear Emunah than to fulfill all his lusts and he doesn't care? So we made, Baruch Hashem, in the last 14 years, we've reached out to people. We've spoken to thousands and thousands of people, to parents and mechanchim. We've given training courses. We hope to make another one very soon. It'll be available on Zoom. And there are numerous audio sets. The first set, which is about Metzius HaBeirei with Niflois HaBeirei. Never has it happened that a Talmud should hear the Niflois HaBeirei as described in our Sforim and come away and say, well, I'm not sure. Never, from thousands. So the CDs have been heard. They were made about 20 years ago by about 50,000 people. The book came out 8 years ago. This book is parallel to those CDs, and it has been read be'erech by about 4,000 people. So we tried to find a way to get this information to our students. So 2 years ago, Pesach, we had the idea to create what's called the Maamin challenge. This is the flyer for the challenge. Those of you who have very strong eyeglasses can read it from where you are. It's basically, it says that any teenager from 9th grade till Beis Medrash or seminary who will sign up to either read or hear the first book or the first set of CDs and pass a test, which you really can't fail if you read the book or heard, will get $100. Get $100. So Baruch Hashem, we've already given out probably about 150 students. We have another 300 signed up. And this is what they've written. The Maamin challenge, because one of the questions on the test is, what did you gain from the challenge? So these are the very short excerpts. The Maamin challenge has provided me with a rock solid belief in the basis of Judaism. By the way, I didn't come here to advertise my organization. I came here to speak about our Thur and what it means. And there are others who are doing this work. There's a book that just came out recently by a friend of mine, Rabbi Sapirman in Lakewood, an excellent book. This is not the only book on Emunah. There are good books. This is the one we have, so this is the one we made the initiative. I now realize that the Torah is absolutely true. I now have an ironclad certainty that Hashem created the world. The challenge dispelled any doubt that I had about my heritage. I can live Judaism without any more doubt in my mind. I have gained a deeper understanding of what it means to be a Jew. These lessons gave confidence in the fight against the other religions and atheism. So I have on a list so far 105 responses from students who took the test, and every one of them is basically saying in different words, this has been life-changing. I'm just going to read you two because 105 will take till Shalashudis. And I wouldn't do that to my friends. But this is what they say. This is a 12th grade Talmidah in Lakewood. It happens to be that my daughter in Lakewood is a very good friend of her mother, and we know that she's a wonderful girl. I have gained tremendous clarity on concepts I thought there were no answers to. And this is the problem. When they don't get the right answers, or if they're afraid to ask, they think there are no answers. Baruch Hashem, I have been gifted with a very analytical mind, and I always had many questions since I was younger, and they bothered me a lot. Whenever I try to ask questions, either I was shut down, which unfortunately happens very often, and looked at as if the questions were my problem, or some people, very kind and patient ones, tried to answer my questions, but their answers didn't satisfy me fully. I read some other books on the topic, and I found some answers, but I still wasn't completely satisfied. Some people told me that just don't ask more questions, they're just going to make you problems. If Judaism is the truth, why shouldn't there be answers with our seichel? So then she said, then when she heard my humble self speak last summer in Camp Aguda for the girls, so she read the book, I feel that I've gained tremendous clarity and finally real true answers to my questions. I feel like a hole inside of me finally closed and no longer feel like a faker when davening and doing mitzvahs and doing all the normal things from girls do. From a 10th grade bacher in a Mizrahi school. I have gained many things from this challenge and wanted to thank you deeply for the opportunity to develop my Emunah and connection to Hashem. Not only have I gone to a new level of Emunah, I have also disproved all my doubts and know exactly how to prove and explain Judaism to others. During Minyan over the last couple of weeks, I have felt close to Hashem, at times feeling as if I'm actually having a one-on-one conversation. And just one more, from a grade 11 bacher in Cedarhurst. During the course of listening to this program, I have had my Emunah strengthened immensely. Not only have I strengthened my own faith in God, but also my ability to confront anyone who challenges Judaism and to also explain the inner workings and logic of our faith to a curious, non-observant Jew who seeks to know more about our heritage, and to perhaps maybe convince him that there's more to the Jewish people and their traditions and faith than meets the eye. And so I'm going to close, but I just want to share just another couple of thoughts. You know, I wear two hats. Okay, they're both Borsalinos, but I wear two hats. I've been in yeshiva chinuch, like I said, for 55 years. I've taught in every school in town. I've taught in other places. But I've also done kiruv concurrently with that. Baruch Hashem, Iyar Hashem Atayv. So this story happened about 35 years ago. There was a young man, got involved, went away to yeshiva, became a Fruma bacher. Today he has, Baruch Hashem, Fruma grandchildren. I know him, he's a member of the community. And his parents, his mother called me up and she said to me, Rabbi, we have concerns. Can we meet with you? I said, sure. So they come and she says, Rabbi, why does everything have to be his way? He doesn't give in on anything. Everything. I know exactly what she meant. She meant like this. Monday night, we'll give him kosher. But Tuesday night, when we go to the Chinese restaurant, Zalamit come and let him come along. One for you, one for me. One Shabbos, let him keep. But the next Shabbos, when we have a family outing, let him come along. No, nothing. So I said to her, you know, if you believe that God gave the Torah, you can't compromise. So she got the most puzzled look on her face that I've probably ever seen. And she turned to her husband and she said, well, we believe that God gave the Torah, don't we, David? And he turned to her with the same puzzled look on his face and he said, I don't know, dear, do we? These were professionals, very educated people, but they'd never thought about what they believe or don't believe. And then a much more powerful thought. Maybe we do the same thing. Maybe we're going by rote. We have accepted all the Emunahs, but we don't think about them to think about the consequences of not listening and the consequences of yes listening, schar b'einish, and so on and so forth. Maybe we do the same. Tell you one more story. I have an anicle. This story goes back to when he got his first chumash. Today he's a Bachar Amatsuyan, Baruch Hashem, he's turning 17. But so when he got his first chumash, the yeshiva Ketana sent me a picture of a smiling boy standing in between, holding his new chumash, in between the Rebbe and the Menahel. Beautiful. What could be better? So as a loyal Zayda, I called him up to give him a mazel tov. I said, Avi, I'm so proud of you. Mazel tov, you got a chumash. Did you know who wrote the chumash? He says, did you? I said, no. You know, when Tati takes you to shul and you take out the Sefer Torah, it's the same words in the chumash. And Hashem told Moshe Rabbeinu to write every word. So I called up the Rebbe, whom I knew well, with. I said, Rebbe, Ikar Chosam and Sefer. He doesn't know the most important thing, that it's the Dvar Hashem. Okay, the Rebbe took care of it very well. I gave at that time, I was giving a mini training course to the Malamdim in the Cheder, before your time. To the Malamdim in the Toronto Cheder, where I've been teaching these in Yonim for 13 years now, Baruch Hashem. Some boys don't sleep on me. So I told them the story. So a few of them were sitting with the Menahel in the staff room. They said, the boys know that. They know that. He said, yeah, let's go test them. The four Machan can walk into the first grade and ask, who wrote the Chumash? Af echad lo yadeya. Echad mi yadeya, af echad lo yadeya. Nobody knew. That in that same time framework, I gave a training course to elementary school Machanchim and Menahalim and Menahalos in Queens. And I told the story. The principal of the Beis Yaakov there said she's doing her own research. So she went into her first grade and she asked the question. And this lucky lady got 3 answers. You know who wrote the Chumash? Shlomo HaMelech, Eliyahu HaNavi, Reb Zelig Epstein. What do we learn from the story? Well, if we don't teach them, they don't know. If we don't focus on Emunah, don't expect them to get it by osmosis. And there are many other things that I would like to speak about, but we don't have till Simchas Torah, so I'm not going to speak about all the other things that are also not on the radar, that if we don't teach them, they will not know. And so, Rab Chaskel, I had the schus to be in Panovich when Rab Chaskel, Zeichet Tzadik, the Chodesh Levracha, was old, but very, very vibrant. And I heard this in his name, only I heard it from somebody who heard it firsthand. From somebody who heard it from somebody who heard it firsthand. He said as follows: when you learn Aleph Beis and you finish, you never learn Aleph Beis again. You know it. With Emunah, you never take your eyes off the basis all your life. Contemplating on Niflois HaBeira, Messias Hashem, and Maamin Yitzias Mitzrayim, and Maamin Al-Sina, you never take your eyes off the basics. And that's what we have to do. That's what we as adults have to do to get that V'yodata and then come to a greater level of V'hashivoisa Elavavecha. And I'm going to close. My last comment will be a story. I cannot finish off without telling the story. About 100 years ago, everybody knows there was a tremendous philanthropist named Moses Montefiore, Moshe Montefiore. He was descendant of Portuguese Jews. They moved to Great Britain, and he was fabulously wealthy, and he also was a member of the British government. He was a member of the House of Lords. He was the mayor of London for some time, and Queen Victoria sent him to Warsaw to negotiate something with the Poles. And I know that everybody here knows that the Poles do not have the best track record of Ahavas Yisroel. And they were not happy that he had sent a Jew to represent him. But what could they do? They couldn't slight the British crown. So they treated him respectfully, Sir Moses this and Sir Moses that, and they organized the parade down the main thoroughfare of Warsaw, and the crowds lined up on two sides of the street. And everybody understood we have to be on our best behavior to make a good impression on the British crown, except for one Sheikh. And when the gilded carriages passed by, carrying Moses Montefiore and the government dignitaries, he screamed out the word that we've heard so many times in so many different languages, Jid, which in Polish is Jew. Moses Montefiore stuck his head out of the carriage and said, police, grab him. They chased him, they brought him, they dragged him back to Moses Montefiore, who was waiting patiently. He took out his purse, and he opened it up, and he held up a gold coin, which was worth a lot of money. And he said, my friend, I want to tell you this. In my life, I've been called a lot of names, a lot of titles. Lord Mayor and Lord this. Those titles mean it. The only title that is dear precious to me is the title that you just called me. And I want to give you this coin as a thank you for calling me Jid. Will know that we have inculcated in them the full degree of Emunah that they have to be proud to be members of the Am Yisrael who received the Torah from HaKadosh Baruch Hu on Har Sinai. Every word of it is the Dvar Hashem, both Torah Shebiksav and Torah Shebiksav. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Rabbi Sapirman, if I have a question, if that's okay.
Can I somehow ask her? I don't answer questions. The office is closed.
Okay, so I have a comment.
What's your question?
My comment is, do I understand from what you said that you're in favor of either prayer or allegiance in public schools, so that would raise awareness of a creator in the world? And secondly, I'm not sure I understand clearly.
I didn't get the question. I didn't get the first question.
Yes, if you support saying the Pledge of Allegiance.
This is not my issue. This is not my issue. If you're short on money, you can call President Biden, he'll lend you $1 trillion. But this is not my issue.
All right. So the second question is,
what else?
Yeah, but you mentioned that it impacted yourself.
No, I didn't say anything about that. I just said that there used to be a respect for authority.
So how do we get that respect back? That was the question. The second thing, more importantly, is how do you differentiate between Emunah Hashem and Avas Hashem? How do I know that person who raised his hands to the heaven expecting to have came from Emunah? If you're giving me knowledge, it's not Emunah. Then I know it. Then I know the answer.
Akiva, it's late. You can ask me this question privately. Now is not the time. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Can I get the recording of tonight's
Yeah, Father. No problem.
Okay.
Including my questions.
Including your questions.
Okay.
How are you?